Bloomberg's senior ETF strategist James Seyffart, known throughout the investment community as JSEEF, has officially placed the odds of an XRP ETF approval at a staggering 95% for 2025, sending shockwaves across Wall Street, crypto, Twitter, and institutional trading desks around the globe. Let that number sink in: 95%. Not 50, not 60, not even 75, but a near certainty according to one of Bloomberg Intelligence's most trusted names in ETF forecasting. This declaration doesn't come lightly. JSEEF was one of the few analysts who correctly predicted the approval timeline for Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, and now he's pointing his laser focus on XRP, citing mounting legal clarity, deepening institutional demand, and critical infrastructural developments within the XRP ledger as undeniable signals that the SEC, the CFTC, and financial gatekeepers are preparing to greenlight the world's first XRP spot exchange-traded fund. And what's more shocking, this move isn't being driven by retail hype or YouTube speculation. It's being discussed in boardrooms, hedge funds, and among top-tier asset managers, all of whom are positioning for the explosive growth potential of a fully regulated XRP financial product. But why now? What's changed? Why is the market suddenly preparing for an XRP ETF when just a year ago Ripple was still knee-deep in its battle with the SEC? It begins with the July 2023 landmark ruling by Judge Torres, which declared that XRP was not a security in and of itself, a ruling that cracked open the door for regulatory clarity and paved the way for ETF providers to begin serious application discussions. Since then, Ripple has strengthened its presence with over 40 central bank and institutional partnerships, secured money transmitter licenses across the U.S., and applied for a full-blown U.S. banking charter, all pieces of a long-term chess game that appears to be culminating in 2025. According to internal sources, BlackRock, Fidelity, and Grayscale have all discussed the framework for filing XRP ETF structures and Ripple's close relationship with these firms through past collaborations. Hints that filings may be more imminent than the public realizes. JSEEF highlights three crucial pillars supporting his 95% prediction: legal precedent, technological infrastructure, and institutional readiness. Legally, XRP has achieved a clarity that few altcoins can claim. Technologically, the XRP ledger now boasts fully integrated smart contract functionality via hooks and sidechains, and is on track to handle tokenized securities, CBDCs, and commodities at scale. And institutionally, Ripple's deep ties with payment giants like MasterCard, Western Union, and multiple sovereign banks position it as a uniquely bridgeable asset between TradFi and DeFi. The ETF approval wouldn't just be a price catalyst. It would be a validation, a legitimization of XRP as a core institutional-grade asset. And make no mistake, this is no longer theoretical. Capital has already begun shifting. On-chain data shows over 5 billion XRP accumulated by institutional wallets in Q2 2025 alone, with OTC markets trading XRP at premiums over public exchange rates, clear signs of silent accumulation ahead of what some insiders are calling the XRP ETF shockwave. Furthermore, Ripple has increased its lobbying activity in Washington, D.C., and reports suggest former SEC and CFTC officials are advising on ETF structuring, ensuring full compliance with evolving regulatory standards. Analysts estimate that an XRP ETF launch could trigger an initial inflow of $12 to $18 billion within the first 30 days, comparable to the initial wave seen during Bitcoin's and Ethereum's ETF launches. But the real impact comes in the form of narrative shift. Once an XRP ETF is live, the floodgates open. Pension funds, retirement accounts, sovereign wealth funds, and robo-advisors can begin allocating to XRP exposure without the technical complexity of managing wallets and private keys. This isn't just bullish, it's transformational. And the price? While no one can predict exact numbers, historical ETF launches suggest anywhere from 300% to 1,000% upside within the first 6 to 12 months post-approval, especially for an asset with finite supply and growing real-world utility like XRP. Imagine XRP vaulting past $15, $25, even $50, once ETF access meets utility-driven demand from tokenized finance and cross-border settlement. Even conservative analysts are revising 2025 targets upward, and Bloomberg Intelligence's confidence in a 95% approval only fuels that fire. The timing is no accident either. With the SEC under increasing pressure from lawmakers, with Ripple nearing completion of its global licensing portfolio, and with the world's largest custodians gearing up for digital asset expansion, 2025 is shaping up to be the year XRP steps fully into the spotlight. So here's the takeaway. This isn't speculation anymore. This is the slow-motion realization of a plan Ripple has been building since 2012. From escrow releases to banking partnerships to corridor expansions across Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, every move has been deliberate, calculated, and future-focused. And now, with the ETF era set to begin, XRP could become not just a fast payment token, but a regulated, traded, institutionally adopted asset class in its own right. As zksync concludes in his report, XRP's ETF trajectory is not a matter of if, but when, and all signs point to 2025 being the year it arrives. For XRP holders who've weathered the FUD, the lawsuits, and the manipulation, this may finally be the validation they've waited for. United States. And the central figure in this escalating battle is Ripple, the company behind XRP, which is now facing an extraordinary effort by traditional banks to prevent it from acquiring a full U.S. banking license. Because make no mistake, Ripple isn't applying for just any regulatory recognition. It's applying for the legal right to operate as a full-service bank under U.S. law, with powers to issue, clear, settle, and custody funds and digital assets at a level that would make it a direct competitor to legacy banking institutions, and that terrifies them. Because Ripple is not another fintech startup. It is a global payments infrastructure company with institutional partners across the world, and now it wants a seat at the core of the U.S. banking system. And that move could disrupt every major player on Wall Street and beyond. Because for decades, the U.S. banking elite have maintained a monopoly on settlement, clearing, and cross-border transfers through slow, expensive, and opaque systems like SWIFT and FedWire, but Ripple threatens to obliterate those profit centers. With XRP-powered rails capable of settling in seconds at near-zero cost without needing Nostro-Vostro accounts or pre-funded liquidity traps. And Ripple's pursuit of a U.S. banking license is not a symbolic gesture. It's a direct bid to cut out the gatekeepers, to become the gate, and the old guard is fighting back with everything they have behind the scenes, lobbying regulators, whispering concerns about risk, systemic stability, and consumer protection. But the real fear is control, because Ripple's entry into the U.S. banking sector would give them the ability to offer services currently monopolized by the big banks. Cross-border payments, commercial settlement, corporate liquidity, even central bank interoperability. And if XRP is allowed to power that infrastructure, it shifts value, power, and fees away from the incumbents and toward the blockchain economy. Which explains why multiple banking lobbyists and industry associations have now started filing memos, opinion papers, and closed-door advisories urging federal regulators to delay or deny Ripple's license application, citing everything from national security concerns to regulatory clarity gaps. Even though XRP has already been declared not a security by the Southern District of New York in 2023, and Ripple has achieved full licensing in over 40 countries globally, including digital asset custody approvals in the EU, virtual asset service provider licenses in Asia, and banking partnerships across Latin America and Africa, yet it's in the US, its home base, where Ripple faces the fiercest resistance because the legacy banks know what's at stake. And they know once Ripple enters their domain with a federal charter, the endgame begins, because Ripple would then be able to directly interface with the Federal Reserve, offer institutional custody of tokenized assets, deploy Relust, their U.S.-regulated stablecoin, at scale, and run real-time settlement with banks, fintechs, and corporations without touching SWIFT or ACH, which would be a death blow to the fee structures that keep traditional banks alive, and they know this. Which is why Ripple's move to secure a banking license has triggered a silent war in D.C.